Mr. Paris, take the comm.
Yes, ma'am.
Move us 400 kilometers from the array, Mr. Paris.
Yes, ma'am.
You like dogs, Mr. Paris?
Yes, ma'am. I always had a dog.
Let's hope it has a slow digestive process.
Yes, ma'am.
Set a course out of here, Mr. Paris. Warp 4. Engage when ready.
Yes, ma'am.
Come about. Maybe if we reverse course, we can just backtrack.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Paris, inertial dampers to flight configuration. Impulse drive to standby.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's drop back a bit. Give them a little more room.
Yes, ma'am.
Try moving us out of here. If we can get some distance between us and those ships, we might be able to block the effects.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Paris, lay in a course for the beacon.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Paris, report to the shuttle bay.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Paris, take a shuttle to the planet and collect additional flower specimens.
Yes, ma'am. But I'd recommend waiting until morning.
Tom, back us off at full impulse. I want to stay ahead of the brunt of that wave.
Yes, ma'am. Impressed?
Oh, it'll take a little more work than that to impress me, Lieutenant.
Yes, ma'am.
Set a course to follow it, Tom.
Yes, ma'am.
Check with the doctor. Maybe he can give you some kind of protection.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Paris, locate the nearest Borg vessel and lay in a course. They shouldn't be difficult to find.
Yes, ma'am.
Tom, plot a course out of Borg space, maximum warp.
Yes, ma'am.
But you consider yourselves under orders to use better judgment about it. Is that understood?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
Captain.
Tom, analyze their approach pattern. Evade them as long as you can.
Yes, ma'am.
Tom, move Voyager into a high orbit, and then join the away team. We'll need a field medic.
Yes, ma'am.
Break out of orbit. Put some distance between us.
Yes, ma'am.
Tom, take us in at 1/2 impulse.
Yes, ma'am.
Reroute power from this holodeck to the emergency relays.
Yes, ma'am.
Hold your position. Keep trying to locate him. We're on our way.
Yes, ma'am.
Take us out of here, Tom. Warp 9.
Yes, ma'am.
In doing so, you disobeyed my direct orders.
Yes, ma'am.
You violated the protocols that govern this crew.
Yes, ma'am.
You nearly caused an armed conflict with the Maneans, and frankly, you're lucky to be standing here right now. I would have destroyed your shuttle if necessary.
Yes, ma'am.
My quarters, 0700. That's an order, Ensign.
Yes, ma'am.
Tuvok, get down there and find out what's happening. We'll join him.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me get this straight. Transdimensional aliens have mistaken your Captain Proton simulation for reality.
Yes, ma'am.
And now an armed conflict has broken out between these aliens and Chaotica's holographic army.
Yes, ma'am. His army of evil.
Any sign of our sphere?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's give him another good shake, just to be sure.
Yes, ma'am. But I guess we weren't quite aware of all the rules.
Because you've been drinking.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, did you win?
Oh, yes, ma'am. We kicked their rackets.
Alter course, Mr. Paris.
Yes, ma'am.
Assign damage repair teams. And Tom, make sure B'Elanna has enough help in engineering. I want those warp engines back online.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have enough power to beam one of you to the module?
Yes, ma'am. I'll go.
Not so fast, Tom. Tom, B'Elanna, get started on converting the warp core.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's batten down the hatches. I'm afraid we're going to have to close your open door policy.
Yes, ma'am.
Tom, put us into synchronous orbit.
Yes, ma'am.
7. Tom, get us closer to that ship.
Yes, ma'am.
Inform the crew.
Yes, ma'am.
Aye, Captain.
Run continuous scans.
Yes, ma'am.
Get our people back.
Yes, ma'am.
Comply with local law. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Tom, I'm sending you some encrypted orders.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Paris, prepare to adjust your heading.
Yes, ma'am.
You better get down there, Tom.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chakotay, the helm.
Yes, ma'am.